What would be considered a good season for Vaughn Grissom in 2023? And just how much better can Ian Anderson be if that slider is what it looked like in practice on Thursday? We'll answer those questions and many more on this mailbag episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on Twitter at shortstopball. Also, make sure you check out my website, shortstopball.com, where you can see some of my written work on the Braves and where some of my other work is as well, including College Baseball Nation. Make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. Send in any questions, comments, or feedback that you have for the podcast. This entire podcast will be built based on the questions and feedback that you provided me on Twitter. If you're new on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. If you're watching this video there, do me a favor and hit that thumbs up button, as it does help support the show a ton when you do that. Thanks, as always, for your support and for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. We continue to post episodes daily, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and we're free and available on all platforms. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And getting started on this podcast, this is going to be a mailbag episode, our traditional Friday mailbag podcast, or if you're with me here live on Thursday night, going to answer all of your Twitter questions and then get to some of the questions in the chat section as well for those who are here live. A lot of great questions. Vaughn Grissom, Ian Anderson, some prediction questions in here as well. So a lot of good stuff to get to. But let's start with Vaughn Grissom. And first question comes from Chad. He says, what would be considered a good year, in quotation marks, for Grissom? And I tweeted this out the other day. For me, I'm starting to come to the idea that the floor for Vaughn Grissom is Ahmed Rosario. And Ahmed Rosario, shortstop for the Cleveland Guardians, if you're not aware, it's a player a lot of people asked me about, should the Braves trade for him this offseason? And I really think that could be the floor for Vaughn Grissom this year. And the type of hitter that would be is somebody who bats, 275, 320, 400 slug, 15, somewhere in the mid-teens in home runs, double-digit stolen bases, again, somewhere in the teens. So, pretty much an average player offensively. That would be about 100 WRC plus, which is an average player offensively, and then slightly below average defense. Again, I think this is the floor for Vaughn Grissom, and even all that adds up at the shortstop position, that's still a 2+ win player. He would still have over 2 WAR according to FanGraphs. In my mind, again, this is, I believe, the floor for Vaughn Grissom. That would be a good season. I just think, the expectations coming in, I think you have to lower them a little bit. But I just still think that would be a good season from him with what the Braves have in the lineup. It's not like, and I don't always want to compare Grissom to Dansby, much like we're going to always compare Olsen to Freddie Freeman. But when Dansby Swanson came up, he was kind of looked at as the guy to kind of turn things around, to be the star of the rebuild. Braves aren't asking that of Vaughn Grissom. There's already an all-star lineup there. Braves are just asking Vaughn Grissom to come in, bat ninth, play an average shortstop if he can do that. And then, I think the bat is good enough. Maybe it suffers a little bit because there will be so much emphasis on him defensively this year in trying to make strides there that maybe he suffers at the plate a little bit. But everything we've seen from him at the minor league level, and even, for a good majority of his time up at the big leagues, I talked about this several weeks ago. Yeah, he slowed down in September and ended up losing his job at second base. He still hit 260 in the month of September. So, again, this is the floor for me for Vaughn Grissom. I think he's ultimately going to be a 340 on base guy, somebody who can hit, 280 or higher, and perhaps somebody with even more power. Kate Shaver's saying I think Grissom hits more home runs than Ahmed Rosario. There's potential for 20 home run power in there for sure. I'm just saying, what would be a good season? A good season in my mind for Vaughn Grissom would be if he just gives us his floor. And I think his floor is somebody like Ahmed Rosario. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section. What would you consider a good season for Vaughn Grissom? Again, it's not just like we need him to be that superstar. He's most likely going to bat 8th or 9th in the lineup. It's going to be, in my mind, more imperative to see him make strides defensively at shortstop to at least become an average defender there, if he's not already. I mean, again, we haven't seen enough of him at the major league level to really make that determination. And that leads me into the next question on here, and that comes from Baltimore Braves fan who says, rank all the shortstops on the spring training roster, including non-roster invitees, by defensive ability only. This is a tough question, and this is going to be pure speculation on my part because I have not had the opportunity to watch all these players defensively a lot. A couple of these guys, were in the college ranks, so I got to see some of them there, but just don't really have a great feeling. We don't have enough data and information to really make an educated assumption here even. But just based on the things I've heard and what I see, this is how I would rank them. I would actually put Braden Shoemake at the top. And I'm not saying Shoemake is a Gold Glove defender. That's more so indicative of the fact I don't know that the Braves have a solid above average defensive player at shortstop right now. But everything I hear about Braden Shoemake, he has the arm, he has the range, the ability to play shortstop position and all over the infield. So I'd actually put him at the top. Then I'd put Adeiny Hechavarria. Again, he's up there in age. Haven't really seen him at the major league level a lot the last several years, but I do know coming up with the Marlins, and even in his time we saw him in a Braves uniform, guy has a slick glove at shortstop. And then I'll go with Orlando Arcia. He is slightly above average defensively at shortstop. This we pretty much do know from his most recent days in Milwaukee in 2019 of being a primary shortstop. Then I would go Vaughn Grissom, and again, I'm hoping he's better than that, but putting him here at 4th, I think again Arcia is probably slightly above average. Hechavarria, if he hasn't aged too much, I think he can be above average defensively. And then again, just what I've heard about Braden Shoemake, haven't seen him a ton at the minor league level, haven't seen him a lot since college where I know he was a solid defender. I think he's probably above average as well. So I'd put Vaughn Grissom 4th on this list as maybe an average shortstop, but again, the jury is still out there. Then I had Cal Conley, Luke Waddell, and Adrianza. I think Conley and Waddell are both more suited for second base. I think they're going to be utility players who could play shortstop in a pinch if needed, but I have both of them as second baseman. And then Adrianza, again, somebody else who I think you could put there in a pinch, but not necessarily somebody that gives you a huge defensive upgrade at shortstop. So that's the shortstop talk for this podcast. Next, we're going to get into Ian Anderson, the starting rotation, what that looks like. Should the Braves go to a 6-man rotation, and so many other questions. We'll get into those here next. If you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want to sacrifice on the taste when you're trying to get something healthy, then you got to try Built Bars. You know about Built Bars if you listen to the podcast for any amount of time. We love Built Bars here. I love Built Bars. I love the cookies and cream. I love the peanut butter brownie. Those are some of my go-to flavors. And I just can't tell you enough how good these Built Bars really are for a protein bar that doesn't taste like a protein bar at all. It just seems like you're getting a candy bar out of the cabinet. And that's exactly what they are, covered in 100% real chocolate. And not only do they taste great, but again, they're great for you. Only about 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And we've been telling you for a while now how you can go to built.com to order yourself a box of Built Bars, and you can still do that. But now, if you want them even quicker, you can drive out to your Walmart or Sam's Club to grab yourself a box today. You can pick up a 4-bar box at Walmart and a 13-bar box at Sam's. So however you want to get your Built Bars, go out and get you a box today. A lot of content on the podcast this week. Please make sure you go back and give those a listen, whether it's the roster predictions episode or what to watch in spring training, which we talked about yesterday. We got a lot of good content coming up in spring training, getting you ready for the 2023 season. But let's jump back into the questions here from Twitter. And this one coming from William Fulgham, who says, if Ian Anderson shows what he can do in spring training, would you rather have him as a fifth starter or trade him for Brian Reynolds? So we're still looking at a Brian Reynolds trade here. I just think it would be, you would have to give up more than Ian Anderson. If Ian Anderson comes out and shows he can be a mid-rotation type of pitcher, I think it's still going to cost more than that. I've said all along, I don't know how the Pirates do that deal without Vaughn Grissom, and I get it. They have O'Neal Cruz. They have Tamara Johnson, who they just drafted, who's probably going to be their second baseman. So they seem pretty covered. They got Brian Hayes at third base, but still, to my mind, that's one of the Braves' best trade assets is Vaughn Grissom. So I got to think he's in that deal, and then probably another high upside pitcher. So it would cost more than Ian Anderson, but if Ian Anderson can figure things out, he's still a mid-rotation starter, and I still think starting pitching depth is so important that I think I would rather just keep Ian Anderson. If it were a one-on-one, straight up deal, then maybe, but it's still going to cost more than Ian Anderson to get Brian Reynolds, in my opinion. Next question comes from Balefire, who says, with the small injury scares already for Wright and Soroka, and given their histories, do we see the Braves go with a six-man rotation early on to let the starters ease into the season and not overload the pen like previous seasons? If so, who are your fifth and sixth starters? So this is something I've kind of hinted at for a while now, that if all the pitchers are healthy, if all of them come into camp and look good, if Mike Soroka is healthy, he looks like Mike Soroka. If Ian Anderson comes in, shows the development of his secondary pitches and looks good, and then the other four, who are locks in the rotation, they're all healthy and look good, I don't see any reason why you don't use a six-man rotation, other than it limits the amount of times that Max Fried and Spencer Strider get to pitch. But I just think if you want to try to limit the workload and make sure that these guys are ready for the postseason, because I think the Braves are a postseason team, and I want to see them healthy, ready to go in October. And I think one way to do that is to, limit the innings on some of these guys, especially early in the season. So I like the idea of a six-man rotation, but to do that, you got to have six pitchers who are healthy and they can go out there and give you a chance to win every time out. And if Soroka and Anderson are healthy and they look like they have in the past, then the Braves could certainly have that. And I think that could be an option and a way to limit the workload of some of these guys. So I'm for it if, again, and I have to emphasize this, if you have six pitchers who are healthy and give you a chance to win. There's no reason in doing a six-man rotation just for the sake of doing it. But if you have six guys who can compete every time out, give you 5 or 6 solid innings, then I'm all for going to a six-man rotation to try and limit the workload a little bit. Next one comes from E. Goldie. He says, might be too late for this question. It is not, E. Goldie. I got you in here. He says, what is one thing you would love to see Ozzie do at the plate to raise his on-base percentage to above 350? What do you expect from him this year? So I don't know that we ever see Ozzie get back up to a 350 on-base percentage. He did it in 2019. For me, I'd take 330. He's been more around 295, 310 the last couple of years. If he could just get it back to 330, I think that would be a huge accomplishment for Ozzie Albies. Couple things he needs to do: chase fewer balls out of the zone. We know he's an aggressive hitter. We know he's a first pitch swinger, which his numbers are good when he puts the first pitch in play. So I don't want to take that away from him. And that's his approach. And it's worked for him. It's turned him into an all-star level player. But if we're just talking about what needs to happen in order for his on-base percentage to improve, got to chase fewer balls out of the zone. He's been in the lower 20th percentile just about every year in chase rate. And walk a little more, take some more walks, work some more at bats. He's been about 3.5 to 3.8 pitches per plate appearances in his career. Could he push that up to 4 and over 4? Can we see him take some more walks? And with his speed, and what he can do on the base pass, perhaps now with speed becoming a more important part of the game. I think that could be huge for him. But, chasing fewer balls out of the strike zone, I think is by far the easiest thing that you can look at and point to and say, if he can, do this better, if he can chase fewer pitches, if he can take more balls, take more walks, that's obviously going to boost his on-base percentage. I think he's also a sneaky beneficiary of the shift rule going away. Ozzie's somebody that can get pretty pull happy at times from the left side. Perhaps he can sneak a couple of balls through the right side more often when he's batting left-handed, and maybe that helps boost his average and on-base percentage up a little bit. But again, I don't see him getting back to 350, but if he can get to 330, that would be huge for Ozzie Albies, and I think he can do it. But he does need to make some adjustments with his pitch swing selection and not chasing as many pitches. Jordan Griffey says, can you project Sean Murphy's stat line and WAR? I think I see Sean Murphy hitting 245, and people are going to hear that number and think, why did we trade for this guy? But keep in mind, he's in there primarily for his defense, and keep in mind that most catchers aren't great offensive players, so the threshold is a lot lower for catchers. But I can see him slashing 245, 325, 430, somewhere around 18 to 20 home runs. And because of his defense, I think he's going to be a 4+ win player. He was 5 WAR player last year. I think he could easily be 4+ win player again this year. Again, mostly because of his defense. Another question from Jordan Griffey. Who do you see getting the most playing time in left field this year? I think it's going to be Eddie Rosario. The left-handed batter in a platoon is always going to get the most at-bats, and I think Rosario's going to get the majority of the spots in left field. The only exception to that is if they really did cut Ozuna, or if they just felt like Rosario deserved those bats at DH more than Ozuna. I could see Rosario getting a lot of at-bats in the DH spot, and then either Hilliard, most likely would be that left-handed option as a platoon in left field. So I would say either Rosario or Hilliard right now, but I'd go with Rosario. And then also over under 97 wins for the Braves. That's going to be a push for me. I predicted a couple weeks ago on here that I've got the Braves at 97 wins right now going into the season. So that's exactly where I would have them. Robert Mullis says, are there any restrictions on outfield shifts? Do you think we might see some teams move left fielder over to short right center field against some left-handed hitters who are over 80% pull hitters? Only thing I've heard about outfield shifts is that you can't have 4 players in the outfield, which is something we've seen before, but with the new rule where you have to have 4 infielders, feet on the dirt when the pitch is thrown, that limits the ability or eliminates the ability to put one of those guys in the outfield, as we've seen with the second baseman, basically playing short right field. I don't see a team really doing too much dramatically shifting with the outfield. Perhaps you see some teams experiment with it in spring training, but I think it'll more so just be the traditional shifting that you see outfielders do, shading gaps on particular hitters. I think you'll more so just see some of that. I don't think we'll see anything crazy, but who knows? Certainly something I can't wait to watch in spring training. Large Lar says, what is the current state of the Braves TV deal? When does it expire? So their TV deal with Bally that they have now ends in 2027, but that's somewhat irrelevant at this point as Diamond Sports, who owns Bally, filed for bankruptcy. Now, I don't have the latest, and I don't have enough knowledge in bankruptcy and what this means and how long the process takes to really tell you what all will happen here and how it will unfold. What I do know is that they're essentially going to lose the rights to the Braves at some point. Most of the articles I've read think it will be some point later this year, perhaps later this summer. Once that happens, the Braves TV rights will essentially be up for grabs, and then we'll just have to see what happens at that point. But yeah, the TV deal is somewhat irrelevant right now just because of the state of Bally and Diamond Sports. Corey Slovich says, any draft eligible college players you'd like to see the Braves target in this year's draft? So I love the college game. As you know, I cover it for College Baseball Nation, but all the guys I like in college are going to be gone by the time the Braves pick at 24th overall. Chase Dollander, Dylan Cruz, Wyatt Langford, Paul Skeens, Jacob Wilson. All of these are college players that I really like, and I think they're great and would be great fits for the Braves, but I think they're all going to be gone by the time the Braves pick. Looking at outfielders who perhaps could move through the system quickly, 2-3 years and have an impact for the Braves. Jack Hurley, outfielder for Virginia Tech, plus defender with good power, could move up quickly. We saw his teammate last year, Gavin Cross, who was a top pick last season. He had an impressive pro debut with the Royals, and seems like somebody that may blow through their system. Not that Hurley will, just because he also went to Virginia Tech, but there were some questions about the Virginia Tech offense and whether or not it was just a systematic offense. But, what Gavin Cross has done already at the pro level would lead you to believe that it's not, and that hopefully that's still the case for Jack Hurley and that he'll be just as good of a hitter. So that's somebody that I really thought of that might be available at 24. Yandy Morales of Miami, I've always loved him since he was a freshman. I think he has a plus hit tool. Power, still kind of coming, but I've always loved his hit tool. Brock Wilken, Wake Forest third baseman, has huge power, which I know the Braves love, but there's a ton of swing and miss in his game. On the pitching side, Hurston Waldrop for Florida, he can touch high 90s. Rhett Lauder, pitcher at Wake Forest, which the Braves have loved taking Wake Forest pitchers here recently. He's got good spin rates on his changeup and slider that gets a lot of swings and misses. And then Will Sanders out of South Carolina, tall right-handed pitcher, 6'6", has some projectability in him. If he can get the control, he has the stuff, and again with that frame, to become a really good starting pitcher someday. But he's somebody that I really like and enjoy pitching just because he pitches with a lot of fire and intensity. And I think he's somebody, again, that might have a little bit more projection in him just because of that big frame that he has, and he hasn't quite filled it out yet. So those are some names for me that I have my eye on, again, who might be available at 24 for the Braves, just coming out of the college ranks. All right, that's all the questions on Twitter. Now I'm going to get to some of the questions in the chat section as well and go over some news from spring training on Thursday. We'll talk about all that here next. It's the midway point of the NBA season, and here now is the perfect time for you to get in on the action and download the FanDuel Sportsbook app, America's #1 sportsbook. You can get in now as a new customer with the no sweat first bet deal that they have, up to $1,000 in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. You can also get on some preseason bets for the Major League Baseball season as well. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet to up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. A little bit of news coming out of spring training camp on Thursday. Good reports. We kind of touched on this a little bit on Ian Anderson's slider. He threw live BP on Thursday. I know Michael Harris was one of the hitters. I think Sean Murphy, perhaps Matt Olson maybe as well. But all indications, all reports say that the slider looks really good and could become a big weapon for him. So that is certainly great to hear. Still need to see it, and obviously throughout spring training. But from his first live BP, everything that we've heard so far and that those who are there have seen is that slider looks really impressive, and it's just going to be, another weapon for Ian Anderson to keep batters off his really good changeup, which there's a funny tweet from Matt Olson, who swung and missed at that really good changeup. So again, that pitch is there. It's always going to be his money pitch, but he's got to get hitters thinking about something else. And what I liked to hear, I think this is a tweet from David O'Brien of The Athletic. I apologize not looking this up beforehand, but he talked about how that slider gives him something with a different break than that changeup. And it's what I was talked about all offseason. That changeup, which has dive and fade into right-handed hitters, He needs something going horizontally the other way, away from right-handed hitters, and that slider gives that effect. So that's certainly great to hear and encouraging. Colby Allard will get the first spring training game of the year coming up this Saturday. And again, I believe it will be on TV. It'll be on NESN. I think it's going to be on MLB Network if you have that. If not, it should be included in your MLB.TV package if you have that. But Colby Allard will be getting that start. Jordan Luplow dealing with some oblique soreness. I hate to hear that. Obliques can be a nagging injury that carry on, but he says he's not far off, but again, a little slow to start camp. Not good. I think he's the best right-handed option for left field. Got a strong arm, good defender as well. So hopefully he can get healthy and compete for that job, but might open up the opportunity for someone like Eli White. Wright will throw a bullpen on Friday, so that's great news to hear. And then Soroka played catch on Thursday as well, so that is great to hear. So good news there on those two starting pitchers for the Braves. All right, jumping into the comment section here, Connor Wise says, who do you think makes the biggest splash like Grissom last year? I don't see any rookies necessarily making a huge splash for the Braves this season. If I had to pick one, I did this the other day when I did my preseason awards predictions for the Braves. I took Dylan Dodd as my rookie of the year. I just think he has the upside. If it gets down to him in the pecking order, which the Braves have a pretty deep starting rotation already, but I do like Dylan Dodd. I think we've talked a lot about Ozzie Albies on this episode, and I think a lot of people are kind of writing him off, myself included at times, but I think he's going to come back this year and just prove everybody, that he is still that all-star level player. So I don't know if that is considered a splash because he's already been that before, but I think he's going to put a lot of people back on notice this season. Bravo's one. I would like to get Reynolds, but I'm also hoping Rosario shows a good turnaround. Me too. Look, Brian Reynolds has 3 years of control. He's a really good player, a switch hitter. I would take him over Rosario all day, but I do hope that Rosario has a bounce back season for sure. Dogs fan says, as long as Murphy's WRC plus is above 100, that's good enough. I think it will be because that power is going to be there, and that power is going to help boost that WRC plus. But I think I think he'll be an above average hitter, and I think he's going to be an elite. A 122 WRC plus last year, and he slashed 250, 332, 426 with 18 home runs. So again, he's very capable of doing that again and being somebody who's an above average hitter, WRC plus over 100. Jordan Griffey says 20 homers and 20 stolen base season for Grissom is very much a reasonable goal. I think it's reasonable that he could hit that. I think to expect that might be a little too much to just expect that to come in. But it would not surprise me in the slightest if he has a 2020 season, but I think it's probably somewhere more in the 15 area. Blake Newsom, how many games ahead do you think the Mets will be ahead by June 1st this year? I have to look at the schedules, but I think the Braves are going to get off to a good start. It'll be an interesting race, but hopefully it's enough that the Braves lights a fire under the Braves so they kind of make a comeback like they did last year, but hopefully this time finish it off in the postseason as well. Marianne Smith, I believe Grissom will hit about 290 and have 19 homers and steal 20 bases if he is ready, and hope he is, and that the errors will be about 19. So another person there looking for, pretty much a 2020 season out of Vaughn Grissom. That would be great. And again, I don't think it's crazy. Like Jordan said earlier, I think it is somewhat reasonable, but I'm just trying to lower expectations a little bit. William Fulgham says Grissom wins Gold Glove this year and makes everyone eat their words. That would be something. I don't think that's going to happen. Blake Newsom said, can't forget about the best shortstop of all time, Hoy Park. I did think about putting him on this list, but I didn't see him on the non-roster invitee list. I know he was optioned to AAA, so I'm not sure if he's in camp or not. That's the only reason I didn't mention him, but I don't know much about his defense either, honestly. Bravo's one. They will write it down. Says give Ian and Ozuna and another pitcher for Brian Reynolds. Nobody's taken Ozuna. I had another question in here about Ozuna. He's not tradable. That's not going to happen. Had somebody else ask, and I apologize, I don't have the name here, but I'll get it real quick. Jay Hall said, seeing how teams are only allowed to use 4 different uniforms this season plus City Connect, what uniform combinations do you think the Braves should use, and which do you think they will actually use? So I'm not a big uniform person. I honestly don't even pay much attention to what uniforms they're wearing. I will tell you, I like the Friday Night Reds. I always put on my red shirt for Fridays during the season. So I do like that one. I think it's their gray bottoms and navy blue tops. I like those a lot as well, but I'm not a big uniform guy. So let me know your favorite uniforms down in the comment section below. But I know a lot of people out there are really big on the uniforms. All right. I think that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Thank you as always for the questions that you send in. If I didn't get to yours in the chat section, I apologize. Please ask them in the comment section. I try to get to every comment out there on every video. So make sure that you ask down there if I didn't get to your question. But again, thank you so much for all the ones that were submitted. But that will do it for this episode. Thank you so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Now go make your second listen to Locked On MLB podcast, where MLB expert Paul Francis Sullivan brings humor, passion, and a unique perspective talking about the biggest stories from around the league. Again, thanks for listening. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. You can follow me at ShortstopBall. Also, make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.